We turn our attention now to our next session, which will be led by Roland Roberts. This is a session on global trends and environmental considerations for research infrastructures. Roland, if you don't already know him, is the Deputy Chief Officer for Research Facilities at the US National Science Foundation, the NSF. He contributes to strategic portfolio planning for research infrastructure and implementation of the policies and practices necessary for the success of research infrastructures in the NSF context. Before I say his name again, I want to give you some psychological advice. And this is, you've done very well, okay? You've seriously done very well with your applause to date. But my advice to you is make your applause as big as you feel, make it slightly bigger than you think would be awkward. And the reason I say this is two reasons. Firstly, because the person that comes up is going to think really, they're going to be in a really good space then. They're going to be pumped up for it. But also because you will actually feel better about it yourself. So it's actually selfish. This is if I ever applaud you and it looks like I care, it's because I'm just trying to make myself feel good. But with that in mind, will you please put your hands together and welcome to the stage, Roland Roberts.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. It's also good for the ego. But thank you so much. And it's a privilege to be back at another ICRI meeting. I enjoyed Bruno a lot. It was great, the networking and meeting lots of familiar faces. And it's good to be back. And thank you for our host in Brisbane. And I've been trying to pronounce it. It's Brisbane. So got it. But thank you so much for being such gracious host. So this session is basically trying to address fundamental research infrastructure and its role in meeting the increasing demand for energy and challenges in energy transmission and storage. We have a keynote and a great panel following that would also address and discuss societal and environmental considerations for sustainable world-class research infrastructures in the energy sector. We begin the session with a keynote from a dear friend of mine and colleague coming from NASA. Dr. Kartik Sheth served as the Assistant Director for Research Infrastructures and Science Equity at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy from 2021 to 2022. He continues to serve as the NASA representative on the Research and Development Infrastructure Subcommittee for the US National Science and Technology Council. He previously also served as the program examiner at the White House Office of Management and Budget for the Department of Energy Office of Science. He currently serves as NASA's Associate Chief Scientist. It is an honor, and basically he told me to let you know that he's not as young as he seems. Whatever you want to do with that. But it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, Kartik.
Thank you very much. Being a friend of Roland means he suggested I do this keynote speech with a week notice. So I'm hoping I can do it justice. As you can see, my title is incorrect. I'm not a program scientist in the astrophysics division. I used to be, but I now serve as the Associate Chief Scientist for the agency, for NASA. If I can have my slides, then that would be great. I'm gonna start my stopwatch here so I don't go over. Fantastic. So today, even though I serve as the Associate Chief Scientist for NASA, what I'm going to speak to you about is really from my experience serving for the last 2 years, on and off in different capacities at the White House, in addition to the 2 roles that that Roland mentioned, I also work very closely with the energy team, and I will show you some of the work we've been doing in that regard, and also talk to you a little bit about sort of the policy aspects of the research infrastructures and how they're set up in the United States. We were told that we should align the presentation and the discussion we have today with the Brisbane Statement. And even though most of you have probably not seen it, I'll summarize in my own words what the statement says, right? So it talks about the fact that research infrastructures are critical for solving many of the global challenges. And what we want to do at this meeting is to really form long-lasting, strong collaborations for the common good, for the global common good. And some of the challenges listed that we are specifically going to address at this meeting are going to be things like climate change, energy, food security, et cetera. But as I read through the statement, I realized, in fact, it's just a subset of what the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals already try to do. And I think what we should really think about is how do research infrastructures really underpin solving the challenges that stand before us with these 17 SDGs. In the Brisbane Statement and with the program that you have in front of you, during the next 2 days, we are going to pay special attention to things like the digital research infrastructure, which we heard in the opening remarks, indigenous knowledge and IK that we just heard about in the previous session, and things like artificial intelligence. So that's my little picture of Hal here, for those of you who are sci-fi fans, you know. It's coming for, no, it's not coming for you. But one of the things I really want to emphasize that I think we've heard sort of in passing, but I really don't want people to forget, is the importance of the human capital framework. It's the people who make the research infrastructures go, and we should not forget about them. And we often make the mistake of thinking about facilities rather than the people. And so I think it's important for us to remember that. Okay, so I was asked to speak based on my experience in the energy sector on research infrastructures and energy. And I wanted to show these plots to you to kind of give you an idea of how much energy is really being used by the world as a function of time in that top left graph for you. That graph shows you that today our world need is 183,230 terawatts last year. And there's also a breakdown of where that energy comes from. In the bottom left, you can see the energy usage per capita across the world. And you can see that there are many countries where an individual person is not really using very much energy. And perhaps the most interesting plot is the one here on the right-hand side, which shows you that energy and the availability of energy and the use of energy corresponds to lifestyle and living standards. And we can see that energy is vitally important for everybody to have the quality of lifestyle that we enjoy in the industrialized Western world, in Australia and places like that. As much as we would like to think that we can make all of our research infrastructures more energy efficient, we heard the SKAO now has only half the requirements. In fact, in order for the world, for that common good to occur, we're going to see an incredible need for increasing the total energy output of the world. And we're going to have to be able to get that energy to everybody in the world so that everybody enjoys the high standard of living that we do in the US or Australia and Europe. When we think about the energy sector, we also shouldn't make the mistake of only thinking about energy production. And we often only focus on that. Simply producing energy is not enough. We're going to have to think about how to get energy into remote parts of the world, and how do we store the energy and distribute it in a way that our grid is sustainable. So Roland asked me to come up with some questions that the panel might discuss. And these, I'm hoping, are questions that you also take away with you in your networking meetings, in the sessions that follow, that we might ask and start to begin to come up with answers for. For each of these pieces in the energy sector, what research infrastructures are really necessary? Are the research infrastructures going to be a catalyst, or are they going to be a barrier for people? And how do we make sure that the research infrastructures lead to innovation? I'll give you a couple of examples of where we are doing that. An important thing to remember for us is, are our research infrastructures truly sustainable? And are they agile enough as technology changes? 5 years ago, I don't think we would have necessarily talked about the importance of artificial intelligence. So how do our research infrastructures change to be able to meet new technological advances that we see in the world? An important point, especially from the last session that we should think about, are like, who are the stakeholders for our research infrastructures? And for those who are doing the funding, do they recognize the return of investment on these research infrastructures? I think mistake that often we as scientists make is to simply think that, of course, everybody understands why this science is important, and we don't do a good enough job really calculating the economic benefits of the research infrastructures that we invest in. Again, I will emphasize this multiple times, that the people who make the research go and the research infrastructures happen are very critical. So we need to think from the very beginning about those who are not at the table, and those who we need to involve in the research infrastructures to make sure that everybody is involved in using them for, again, the common good of the world. And then finally, we will hear this many times in this meeting about open science and open access. How will we share that data in a responsible way so that everybody can share the fruits of our investments in research infrastructures? I want to give you an idea of research infrastructures in the United States context, first from a policy point of view. When I was at the White House and as the AD for research infrastructures, we published this particular national strategic overview that fundamentally was a product that was started in the previous administration, in the first Trump administration, and it gives high-level guidance to the agencies on what research infrastructures are and what they should do. But the first thing I want to point out to you is that research infrastructures are really coordinated in the United States through multiple committees, but an important committee is the Research and Development Infrastructure Committee that is run by the National Science and Technology Council. And it's not just the National Science Foundation that is doing the research infrastructure funding and development in the United States. You can see that the membership of this committee includes the Office of Science and Technology Policy, the Office of Management and Budget. Both of those are White House policy councils and entities. Then in addition to that, you have this alphabet soup of federal agencies that come together to develop documents like this so that we can all be on the same page on how we can advance research infrastructures together. And while you have the usual suspect, which are National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, NOAA, National Institutes of Health, NASA, et cetera, it was very important for us to also invite, in my tenure there, we invited Department of Transportation to come and be part of our committee, or the US Patent Office, et cetera. So in order for us to truly advance research through research infrastructures, having this interagency coordination is really critical in the US context. We defined what research infrastructures mean in the US context. We call it RDI. So I'm going to have to work really hard all week to make sure I don't say RDI and I say RI, which is what this conference uses. And there were 4 main things that are sort of high-level items that we highlight in this report. Now, these may seem obvious and somewhat pithy to think about. Of course, one should maintain strong and integrated RDI planning and coordination. Of course, one should ensure that RDI support a flexible and agile RDI enterprise. But the reason for this high-level guidance is so that all of these different agencies that have their own research infrastructures can actually implement them in their own context while making sure that the high-level policy standard is achieved. A really critical part of our report was this figure 2, which highlights sort of the 3 main components of a research infrastructure. There is obviously the experimental and observational infrastructures, which we think about, the telescopes, the ships, et cetera. But there's the research cyber infrastructure. We heard about the fact that SKA will produce 2 petabytes a day. Before that, we had ALMA in Chile, also an intergovernmental entity that is producing terabytes of data a day, and built a correlator that operates at petaflop speed to correlate the data in the interferometer. How do we analyze the data, transmit the data, and store the data? And then finally, on the bottom here is the knowledge base. And again, we should not forget that research infrastructure also includes libraries and includes discussion of IP and copyright. And most importantly, the human capital infrastructure, again, that I wanted to emphasize. Now, earlier this year, in fact, in May, our committee also published another report which highlighted 4 concerning trends for the United States research infrastructures. And these are the fact that we have aging and inadequate research infrastructures, and having an aging infrastructure, because a lot of our facilities were really built after World War II, is leading to a huge amount of cascading impacts. So for example, if you don't have consistent power, or your toilet is backing up because the facility is very old, it's unlikely that no matter what state-of-the-art machinery you have inside your building, that it will operate at full efficiency. So those cascading impacts then mean that we have to pay attention to secondary aspects of research infrastructures to make sure that they are in top shape. This is leading, at least in the United States, to widening gaps in science and technical outcomes. And what we are seeing, US has always been a place that has tried very hard to recruit talent from across the world and retain the talent. And we can see in the data that today the world's best scientists and engineers and technicians have many places they can go to, because US no longer has the top-notch research infrastructure. Now, to overcome this report recommended that we do strategic planning, identify gaps, really compare ourselves to international standards and try to get there, and really share RDI strategies across the US government. Again, very high-level recommendations, but the intention here is to make sure that each agency then uses, if you go to this report, obviously it's not 4 lines long. Underneath each of these recommendations is a detailed checklist of the things an agency can do to try to implement these mitigations. You can see other examples of the concerns highlighted in this report. For example, for my own agency, there was a report that was recently published by the National Academies called NASA at Crossroads. And the criticism in this report is that NASA has spent perhaps overly emphasized short-term gains and missions and not paid attention to the long-term needs of our research infrastructure. Today at NASA, we are $3 billion in arrears on our aging infrastructure, and more than half of our infrastructure is well past its usable lifetime. So we have some serious issues that we need to tackle, and these reports are really trying to bring attention to this. So I added this slide last night because we have a lot of people from the National Science Foundation, and we actually have, I think I'm the only NASA person here, perhaps, and we don't have anybody from any of the other agencies. So what I wanted to point out to you is that over 20 agencies in the United States fund research and development. And this particular table is from the Analytical Perspectives that is a book that is published in addition to the President's budget every year. It's a chapter I helped write when I was at the Office of Management and Budget. And you can see here the actual amount in millions of dollars that each of these agencies is spending on research and development. In addition to that, in this particular report, if you go to Chapter 6 of Analytical Perspectives, this funding is then broken down by how much each agency spends on basic research, applied research, experimental development, and facilities and equipment. So this is just, I just wanted to broaden the lens for everybody here beyond the National Science Foundation to say that this information is there, and we publish this every year. Now, of course, the funding situation in the US is very different than many other places. We do our budget every year, and that has its own set of pros and cons that happen. In addition to the President's budget, you can also find analysis of what the US funding on research and development means and its impact on the taxpayer and on the country in reports from the Congressional Research Service or in the Congressional Budget Office. So I hope that sort of gives you a good idea of the research infrastructure context from both the policy side and from the budget side. I should also mention on the policy side, it's not just the RDI committee that tries to coordinate the different agencies. We have committees that really try to coordinate in advanced computing and quantum information systems on a variety of different science and technology issues. And that's sort of how unlike CSIRO, where there's a single agency, it's kind of a complex ecosystem in the US. So I just wanted to share that with you. Now this particular session is supposed to focus on energy, and I started out the talk by talking about the fact that we expect our energy demand to more than double, perhaps, in the next 10 years. So how are we going to accomplish that? Well, we published a report, US Innovation to Meet 2050 Climate Goals, where we really highlighted 37 technologies that really are inchoate and are growing in their research scope that can allow us to generate more energy. And then to distribute the energy, the things that are in gray are showing you cross-cutting things that we need to address in order to get the energy to meet the demands of the world. We then furthermore divided these 37 technologies, and these reports are available to you online, into things that would have transformational impact, broad impact, and targeted impact. And if you look at that report, that administration highlighted 4 or 5 things that it wanted to focus on. Those might change from administration to administration, but I think the report is very good in terms of highlighting what are the technologies that we can work on to try to create more energy in the world. And in order to make that happen, the inherent research infrastructure is present in these agencies, and a lot of it in the Department of Energy at the national labs. And of course, I put that little thing on the bottom left to remind us that we also need to grow the people who are going to work in careers in energy and work with these research infrastructures. There are also some other technologies that are not mentioned in that report. So while fusion is mentioned in that report, technologies that are now growing, like space solar power, or how do we take renewables and make sure that we store that energy so we have dispatchable power? These are really interesting new places where I think at this conference and going forward, we can collaborate as a world, because it is the promise of us being able to get energy to everybody in the world in remote parts so that everybody can have the standard of living that we would like everybody to have as a humankind. And then a question that we might think about is, what is the research infrastructure necessary for these developments? And I'm happy to talk about it. I did a lot of work on the space solar power bit, so happy to talk about that at this meeting. Finally, a lot of us as scientists spend a lot of time in labs, and we think about the basic research and the research infrastructure is necessary, but in order for it to be meaningful to the world, we have to figure out a way to make it usable. So how do we bridge this chasm, going from technology readiness levels 3, 4, 5, going up to 6, 7, 8, and 9? How can we make sure that that energy that we generate is going to be equitably accessible by everybody in the world? One thing we may want to do is involve economists. I worked on a macroeconomics framework called Valuables, where we tried to measure the valuation of societal benefits from Earth observations. Perhaps we should do that with energy as well. And what kinds of partnerships which involve academia, government, and industry, which we've seen some examples of this morning, that we can apply. In the US, the main vehicle for this is Manufacturing USA Institutes, which were built kind of on the model of the Fraunhofer Institutes. And these don't actually have international partnerships set up, but I would like to think that perhaps this is a vehicle for us to bring international partners, academia, government, and industry together. And of course, undergirding all of the answers to this particular bridging of the chasm are new technologies like AI and quantum information systems that might help us do this. So with that, I'm going to just end and say thank you. I hope I've given you some interesting perspectives on the US research infrastructure landscape and some questions that we can tackle. And also, this is my first ICRI meeting, so really, I know nobody here except Roland and a couple of other people. So I just put in my LinkedIn note here. I'm happy to talk to anybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Kartik, for sort of setting the framework for our discussion. Issues about deferred maintenance and energy costs related to deferred maintenance. Thinking long-term rather than short-term, the importance of human capital development. At NSF, we also focus on the skilled technical workforce. How do we train the future builders of research infrastructures, not just the folks doing the science, but the folks building these research infrastructures, and then reminding us of the issue of equity as we deal with this. We have a geographically diverse group of panelists to assist us with the discussion, and one of the things I want to encourage is questions from the audience. I don't want to be the one asking all questions, so please be prepared to participate by asking questions. So first, I would invite to the stage Professor Kerry Wilson. She is the Queensland Chief Scientist. Her career encompasses roles at the Queensland University of Technology, including Pro Vice Chancellor for Sustainability and Research Integrity, and Executive Director of Queensland University of Technology Institute of Future Environments. Previous leadership roles include Director of Conservation for the Nature Conservancy of Australia, Director of ARC, Center for Excellence for Environment Decisions, and she's currently a natural sciences expert for the Australian Heritage Council. Kerry, please join us. Joining us is our colleague from Europe. He is broadly European, though originating from Spain. Jose Luis Martinez is the ICRI chair. His research career includes positions as research professor at the Instituto de Ciencia de Materiales, scientific staff of ILL in France, research assistant at BNL in the USA. From 2007 to 2012, he was associate director of the ILL in Grenoble, France. And from 2014 to 2017, he was been functioning as CEO of ESS Bailabo. Also a member of the 2017 of the Commission Nationale d'Evaluation of OPECST. I'm sure there is a pronunciation for that. But I'm not going to try that one. So Jose, welcome. And finally, our South American colleague from Chile, Gonzalo Arenas, currently serves as the head of international affairs at Chile's Ministry of Science, Technology, Knowledge, and Innovation, where he heads strategic initiatives to advance Chile's position in global science and technology. With over 15 years of experience in science and policy and international cooperation, he has held key positions across Chile's innovation ecosystem. His expertise also spans advisory roles at the Ministry of Interior of Chile and international development work in Mali and Libya. Gonzalo. Thank you. All right, so we would have interventions from our three panelists to complement or contradict Kartik's framing of the sort of situation from the US perspective. So first, I would call on Carrie.
Every time I do that, I think that there's a sound person going, please just don't touch the mic. So sorry, sound person, sorry. Okay, I won't touch it again. Okay, thank you, Roland, for the introduction. Thank you also, Kartik, for your fantastic opening, outlining the opportunities, but also significant challenges. It really sets the scene nicely. I'd like to first acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where we're meeting today, the Turrbal and Yugara people, and I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I also acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander persons here today with us. So, reflecting on the keynote and thinking about why we're all here this week, the word that has jumped out to me in preparing for this is one of potential. So there's potential for new knowledge, potential for new solutions, and also, I think importantly, potential for new ways of working. All of this is underpinned by high quality research infrastructure and staff that manage the facilities and the equipment. And most critically for our planet, and we've seen some great data already on the energy challenges that we have, our research infrastructure has the potential to really push the science around new sources of energy, space energy. This is new to me, but maybe I'm just out of the loop, and also low carbon technologies. And not just at the beginning, but across the whole supply chain. Australian Chief Scientist Dr. Kathy Foley is finishing her term, and recently I think we all heard with interest her words that we need foresight, planning, and a lot of money for research infrastructure to ensure Australia is adequately prepared for the technologies coming over the horizon. Dr. Foley also relayed that the Prime Minister's National Science and Technology Council has initiated a project to look at the Australian research infrastructure system, obviously complementing other major investigations underway presently too. I understand that review will look at Australia's role as part of the global research infrastructure community, that community beautifully represented here by this audience. I understand there's around 60% participants from outside of Australia, and also by the geographically diverse panel we have here today. So that review will, I understand, consider how research infrastructure is funded here in Australia, how it's made sustainable, how it supports translation. What is best practice commissioning and also decommissioning? And my hope is that as part of that conversation, we also have a look at and give consideration to how we green our research infrastructure facilities from inputs through to outputs. Now, as Kartik referenced, research infrastructure is not just high-tech equipment. I've been trained by Satch and Joe in this. It's underpinned by highly skilled and an increasingly specialised workforce. So I really want to give emphasis today to that comment and the need to offer more job security, career mobility and professional development to retain workers in what is an increasingly competitive environment, not just in the US, but also here. Here in Australia, we've recognised this. The Expert National Research Infrastructure Advisory Group recognises it. We've also heard recently here at another conference in Brisbane of the establishment of the Academy for Collaborative Research Infrastructure. And now this academy will be a key advocacy body for the research infrastructure workforce to reward and recognise their contributions. And Professor Joe Shapter, I believe, is talking about this in more detail tomorrow, so please check out that. So just briefly, a couple of comments on the role of research infrastructure here in Australia to support a clean and green economy. In a minute is my round of applause opportunity from you all, so I'll point it out when it occurs. But we do have some fantastic examples here. QUT and Griffith are researching high-performance batteries and battery recycling. Thank you for your efforts and working in collaboration. Here is the chance for a round of applause. Microscopy. See, I did it. That's my personal achievement at this conference. Thank you. I won't say it again, but the hub is creating new technologies and supporting advanced batteries, renewable energy sources, and the recovery and recycling of mining waste. And of course, we have in Mackay, in regional setting here in Queensland, the biocommodities pilot plant, turning agricultural biomass into biofuels. My team recently announced $10 million in support for the Queensland Quantum Decarbonisation Alliance to establish 7 new collaborative research teams to apply quantum technologies to solve decarbonisation challenges. That's supported by additional money to build new research infrastructure facilities. So in closing, I'll say that the challenges we face as a global community are unprecedented, and as such we need to invest a lot and invest wisely in research infrastructure to fully capitalise on its potential to support a vibrant and more sustainable and equitable future for everyone. And I see this conference as a fantastic opportunity to really shed light and dig into that potential. So thank you.
Thank you, Kerry, for reminding us of the importance of this issue in the Australian context and specifically the Queensland context, that this is an issue that has to be considered across the life cycles of research infrastructures and globally also. I'll now call on Jose to add his intervention.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think I will from here, and I will try to be short to have more time for the discussion. But my message will be that from the European perspective, I will call the energy challenge for the research infrastructure. I mean, at least from very broad sense, we can divide it in 2 parts. The first one is how the research infrastructure actually already operating contribute to these challenges of energy. And from the European perspective, from ESFRI perspective, we have different research infrastructure contributing to this challenge, but in particular in our ESFRI work, we are really divided in 6 thematic areas, and one of those is energy. So we have research infrastructure directly dealing mostly about the production of energy, but future production. So we have research infrastructure in fusion, like Smith Donnes, or we have research infrastructure in the area of solar energy, mostly thermal solar energy, Solaris. We have different research infrastructure, for instance, a new research reactor, nuclear research reactor, in order to develop new material for the future fission reactor, this is Julorovich reactor. So we have different research infrastructure directly with this challenge of energy, but with the production of energy. But of course, the challenge of energy is much more than production of energy. We have to transport and we have to accumulate. And this is really very difficult. And in that sense, all the other research, or many of different research infrastructure from another domain contribute very strongly to this challenge in energy. And of course, for instance, and I will start with the things like maybe we don't think about very often, is social science and humanity research infrastructure. Really is very important for that challenge, because we have to know how the population perceive the energy challenge and how they really could contribute to really this challenge for all of us. But of course, we have different research infrastructure in environment where you can measure the footprint of this kind of energy production, energy transportation, and energy consumption. Of course, not mention the carbon footprint and how you can the possibility to store the CO2. But I'm also thinking very much about we call it analytical research infrastructure. And of course, analytical research infrastructure who goes from synchrotrons, neutron techniques, electron microscopies, and even magnetic fields, really has a very strong development or research programs to develop new material for batteries, for new type of electrolyzer to produce hydrogen in a more efficient way, different technologies for transportation, different material for transportation of energy. So many, I mean, it's a very broad, really, contribution from the research infrastructure to this challenge of energy, which is a global challenge for the present society and for the future society. But I would say this is one aspect. The second aspect is about the research infrastructure itself. They have to consume energy, and they have to reduce the footprint, and they have to be more efficient. So in order to do that, I think the best and more important point is to start from the beginning. If you don't start from the beginning, you have a problem. So, but before I forgot, I have a small commercial. So all this kind of analysis of the energy is written in a book that we published in June this year. It's the landscape analysis that you have a very broad description of all the research infrastructure in Europe and how they are connected one to the other. So I finished the commercial. And this second aspect about the footprint of the research infrastructure itself. Of course, when you have already, and I think was written by you, already one research infrastructure working from the last 40 years, maybe it's not impossible. They have to make their own effort. But this effort will be completely different that the effort has to be done by a research infrastructure you are really planning today to be constructed in the next 10 years. And for that, in our, let's say, restriction of the S3 war, S3 business, we are now in the process that was really already said by Odrek about to propose new projects. And we are now in the process today, we call it Roadmap 2026. So we are just in the middle of the process that the people, it's a bottom-up process. Researchers in Europe will propose new research infrastructure. We will evaluate, and we will go to the so-called Roadmap 2026. That means that in the Roadmap 2026 probably will be presented the different research infrastructure in different domains that we think after the evaluation, and we propose to the member state and European Commission the research infrastructure we think are necessary for Europe in the future to become more competitive and really is necessary for the research. So the important point is this kind of energy consideration has to be taken from the early moment of the project. And I think in this call that we made for the Roadmap 2026 is for the first time we include all the energy consideration in the evaluation of the project. So the project itself has to present a complete description of the challenge, scientific challenges, scientific impact, digital policies, but also the environment aspect, and from the broad sense. And they have to include that from the beginning. This means that they have to think about that, how to reduce, because at the end of the day, we are not giving up about the main purpose of the research infrastructure is to do excellent science, but could be a measurement system that excellent science can be achieved by different ways. And how many kilowatts or megawatts you need to do this excellent science? It could be a different path. And we would like to choose the path who has less environment impact. So that will be my first communication to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for reminding us that we have to be proactive and intentional with all of this. And I love that you raised including the social science and humanities in the equation. We have to be proactive and intentional with that also. It cannot be an afterthought, basically, as we try to solve some of the global problems that we are grappling with at this point. So the final intervention, last but not least, is our colleague from Chile, Gonzalo.
Hello. Yes, thank you, Roland. Very nice to be here after month and month of discussion of this event. and very happy to discuss about this particular topic because Chile is really at the intersection of large infrastructure and the energy transition. We host nearly all the big telescopes on Earth, so nearly 60% of all the Earth capacity to observe space is in Chile because we have quite unique condition in the northern part of Chile. So very low humidity, very high mountains. So it's, with the SKA place, probably the best places on Earth to do that tolerance. And that's why we have those largest. We have, and now we're going to have additional observatories coming online. Next year, normally, we'll have the first light of Vera Rubin that will also add pentaflops of data each and every night. And in the coming years, also the extremely large telescope, which is very not a creative name, but very appropriate name because it's huge. And we have also other places because the geography of Chile is quite unique. And we have also in the room a representative of the southernmost research facility on Earth, which is Puerto Williams, which is further south from Ushuaia, so at the very tip of the American continent, and other places where we are really quite a unique place. But we also, those same condition offers us also one quite unique place on Earth to do renewable energy. We have the same condition that offers the clearest sky, also offer the most radiated place on Earth. So the northern part of Chile is very good for solar energy. And it's so abundant that the curtailment of renewable energy in the northern part is above 40% sometimes. So we don't use it because since it's a very long country, it's also very hard to move that energy around across Chile. And we're doing, and in that part also is very useful for green hydrogen and ammonia, and in the southernmost part of Chile, also Patagonia, is very good for green hydrogen. So we have a very ambitious plan for green hydrogen production in Chile. And we've working, so at the intersection, we've been working with the observatories to support their efforts for renewable energy, and now ESO operation in Chile is 100% renewable. So Paranal, La Silla, all the telescopes are using 100% renewable energy. We also, at the early stage and starting to operate a new institute in lithium and salt flats, because also Chile is one of the top producers of lithium on Earth, which is a critical material for the renewable energy transition. But we don't want to just did what we did a bit with copper, just take out the lithium. And so we're building an institute in order to research around lithium production, so how we understand better the extraction, the use, and the impact it has on the salt flats that are quite unique place on Earth. It's the driest place on Earth. So you're taking water out of the driest place on Earth in order to produce lithium. So that's a huge topic, but also looking at the salt flat beyond the renewable energy. So not only lithium, but also organisms like extremophiles can then be very useful for a lot of application, including space. So it's a broader approach of this energy transition. We also have a data center plan, which is connected to this AI evolution, where the energy is expensive to move around, but the data is not that expensive to move around. So what we're trying to do is move the data center infrastructure related to AI closer to where the energy is produced. So the northern part of Chile, for now, probably in the south also. So we can have that infrastructure which is critical for AI, but in a renewable energy setting. But Chile can offer that perspective. If we also take an example from astronomy, a lot of you might know that Chile has access to 10% of the time of the telescope that are operating in Chile. And we want to use kind of the same idea with this data center infrastructure for AI, where we provide a good landscape, a good access to renewable energy, but we ask in return some access for our own researcher to that AI capacities. But it would be easy to just speak about how we can green the infrastructure and what my colleagues have said. And it would be very easy if it was just one dimension conversation. So when we put renewable energy into research infrastructure, and, which is not a simple conversation, but there's also a more complex conversation, and Chile offers a good example of that because we're just precisely at the intersection. And we've been discussing for the last month with ESO and a project, a renewable energy, one of the largest one in Chile, green hydrogen, ammonia production in the northern part of Chile, huge project, right in the middle of the renewable energy needs, but very near to Paranal. So that massive infrastructure that is needed for the renewable energy might also have an impact into another research infrastructure, which is Paranal. So we've been working hard to try to understand how we can come up with a way for those infrastructure to cohabit or not have significant impact on each other. Because Chile needs both. We're part of this infrastructure and we're part of this scientific ambition of hosting large infrastructure, but also part of this renewable energy push. So how do we fit the balance? It's not just a one-dimension conversation where we need to put more green energy in. It's also the larger framework of where and how does we need, because this is a clear example, but we might probably find other places where the green energy transition might affect or impact places where we do science and big infrastructure.
Thank you, Gonzalo. One of the issues you raised is with AI and how AI might contribute to solving some of the problems. We've all read and heard of the potential of AI. And this goes, I think we have time for one question, and I don't know if there are any questions from the audience, but how do we balance the need to be more energy efficient against the energy needs of AI? And I don't know which of you, Kartik, do you want to start?
I mean, I think we all know that AI requires enormous amounts of energy, and we already see real strains on existing energy infrastructure because of the growing need for AI. So I think the answer is pretty straightforward. We're going to have to generate a lot more energy, and we're going to have to do it in a way that is sustainable.
Yeah, I think we have a big challenge in front of us. I was reading a report, I mean, the consumption of energy of the single board of this NVIDIA latest generation, working at 60% of the power, because can be run depending on the calculation, consume equivalent to one electric car during 1 year, making 15,000 kilometers. Or the equivalent of the energy consumption of the household during 1 year, including heating and electricity. So the number I heard is last year was sold in the United States 3 million this car, because many people apparently has at home in order to play games and maybe to calculate this kind of crypto money or whatever it's called. And of course, they are not selling 3 million electric cars in the United States per year, not at all. So it's a huge challenge there. I don't know, I mean, we don't know. We have to produce this energy if we want to increase that. And now, at least in Europe, there are many projects, we are very important projects, I think, about artificial intelligence related with the, I know, Barcelona Supercomputing Center, Jülich Supercomputing Center in Denmark. There are also, so there are plenty of projects which are really completely necessary and really very important and will really make a difference in the future for the research. But we have to produce this energy. So we need probably all the possibilities to produce energy. Of course, from solar energy, from hydrogen, from fusion, and from fission. But we have to have a very diverse, let's say, system of production energy, because really this kind of technologies related with artificial intelligence are really very hungry of energy.
Gonzalo? Yeah.
Yes, connected to what I mentioned about the data center plan, I believe that the AI needing energy really reflects kind of the essence of this conference, which is about international cooperation on infrastructure, because we will need that intense cooperation in order to fulfill the energy needs of AI. And that's why in Chile we've tried to come up with this plan for data center, trying to put the AI need closer to the renewable energy resource that we have. But that's a larger question, because we need to take also advantage of what AI offers, in the sense that it's not the data center or the infrastructure needed to upload the videos or that we see. It can be further from the cities. It can be closer to renewable energies, but also that raises a lot of questions. So international cooperation around the AI and having access coming from developing countries, for those countries to have access to that capacity is also very relevant. So it's not only about each and every of our countries building capacities in AI, but how we can put that capacities in coordination with other countries that might have the capacities or might not have the energy capacity to produce renewable energy for that AI. And because if we go at the geopolitical conflict that is brewing around AI, we're going to have a lot of AI capacities that is not renewable. So international cooperation would be very, very critical.
I know we're out of time.
Yeah.
Can I make one quick point? One of the research infrastructure techniques for fusion or space solar power, et cetera, that people are trying to perfect is power beaming. And that would be one way to transmit energy over long distances. And I should just mention 2022, I think the total amount of global GDP that was spent on energy production was 13 or 16%, $2 trillion, I think. So there's a huge economic upside to really solving these problems.
Yeah, so, and again, thanks for reminding us, Gonzalo, that solving these problems would require global collaboration, right, as we try to grapple with some of these challenges. But we don't want to be the ones encroaching on your lunchtime, so join me in thanking Kartik, Carrie, Jose, and Gonzalo.